Hello, I'm the host of Discover the Oak Ridges Moraine video series, Susan Lloyd Swale. This video series is a journey in learning about the Oak Ridges Moraine through visual exploration and interviews with experts. The Oak Ridges Moraine, known as Ontario's rain barrel, is a major source of groundwater for the Greater Toronto Area and the lifeblood of Ontario's greenbelt. But as you'll see in these videos, it is so much more. Here we are at episode 9. You're going to find out today about how the Oak Ridges Moraine is part of a natural system. Did you know nature provides free infrastructure like wetlands that filter water and protect communities from flooding? In this episode, I interviewed two conservation experts, Rob Messervey and Ontario Nature's Executive Director Carolyn Schultz, to learn about ecosystem services. We're on the Oak Ridges Moraine this afternoon at a lovely conservation area called Crow's Pass Conservation Area in Scugog. With me today is Carolyn Schultz, an expert in the field. So thank you, Carolyn, for joining us today. I want to ask you about the work of Ontario Nature on the Oak Ridges Moraine. Could you give us a little background of what kind of work Ontario Nature has done on the Moraine?
Ontario Nature was pretty instrumental in working with farmers and other landowners and other partners to work towards tree planting to actually stabilize the soils and sort of bring back the natural vegetation on the moraine. And since then, Ontario Nature's had a lot of involvement, and it's always been a sort of prime conservation concern, but it really wasn't until the 90s when sort of rampant urban sprawl and development was threatening the moraine that Ontario Nature became really engaged again and worked with a number of partners, including the Save the Oak Ridges Moraine Coalition, to fight for increased protection on the moraine, and ultimately that resulted in the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan in 2002. So quite a number of years campaigning and urging communities and people on the moraine and off the moraine to demand protection for the moraine. We've been involved in an ongoing way to ensure that there isn't any inappropriate development on the moraine, again working with many partners. The moraine is incredibly important from a biodiversity standpoint. It is incredibly rich in species of all kinds, and it's also home to almost 90 species that have been identified as being at risk of extinction. Crucial habitats, and it has a diversity of habitats too. The moraine isn't all sort of one type of habitat. You've got really mature hardwood forests, and in those forests you have ephemeral ponds where salamanders like the endangered Jefferson salamander breed. And then at the far eastern end of the moraine, of course, you have black oak savanna and tallgrass prairie, which is a very different kind of habitat. So really important, and of course the whole water isn't disconnected from it, the natural cover, so part of the importance with the natural cover, aside from biodiversity itself, is part of keeping the water that the moraine is so important for clean and pure. Well, you could look at the Oak Ridges Moraine sort of as a sort of reservoir for biodiversity. The river valleys that are protected that flow south from the moraine that have been added to the greenbelt act as wildlife corridors so that wildlife species can move from the more urbanized areas south of the moraine onto the moraine and back and forth.
So what actions can communities and governments take to protect and improve biodiversity on and off the moraine?
Well, what governments can do, and by that I mean primarily the provincial government and municipalities, first of all, they need to implement the requirements of the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan and also the provincial policy statement, which sets the parameters for planning. I would say that's first and foremost, and I think that governments also need to be looking to the future and ways that they can actually improve those protections as we learn more and determine what additional measures we need. There are still issues on the moraine despite the conservation plan with activities such as aggregate development. So I think there are many more steps that government can take, but actually respecting and implementing what is in place now is really important. And just generally speaking, finding loopholes to avoid the requirements of the plan and other policy and legislation such as ministers' zoning orders, which essentially pave the way for development in spite of the provisions of these policies. It's crucial that that kind of bypassing of good planning and good decision making is eliminated.
So what can citizens do?
Well, the community science type of projects involve anyone actually who wants to participate. That can be people who actually live on the moraine, but it can be anybody who actually wants to come to the moraine and participate in a community science initiative. A number of organizations do these kind of initiatives, and things like stream monitoring. There are all sorts of sort of resources to direct people to where they think they might be most useful. Some of them require a bit more expertise, but others don't. So there's some sort of, in my view, there's something for everyone.
That's fabulous. And Ontario Nature, as you say, has been the voice of nature for how many years now?
90 years this year.
90 years Ontario Nature has been the voice of nature. So if you are interested in protecting nature, get involved, contact Ontario Nature. They have excellent blogs and excellent information for citizen science and just for learning about nature. Thank you, Carolyn, for being with us today. I really appreciate it. We're here today to talk about why conservation matters. So Rob, could you fill us in a little bit about why conservation matters on the Oak Ridges Moraine?
Sure, Susan, and thanks for the invitation to speak to you all. The Oak Ridges Moraine for me is a very special place. It's been a big part of my career and a big part of my life. So integral to the moraine and the environment is how water and the natural heritage systems tie together. Our natural heritage system, involves mature forest. It involves, elements of wetlands. The moraine is really a feature that supports tremendous biodiversity in terms of natural vegetation. It accommodates about 50 provincially significant wetlands and of all forms, bogs and fens and swamps and marshes, kettle lakes, which are quite unique, and then the animal kingdom, just a tremendous diversity of reptiles and amphibians and mammals, but also think of our insect and butterfly and bird species, which all together share this resource. The Oak Ridges Moraine just brings those hydrologic and natural heritage features together to serve really, really important functions. This area on the moraine was an area where members of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee groups would come, from Lake Ontario up into the Lake Scugog area as a canoe route to, support their communities in hunting and fishing activities.
So what is your sense of the overall ecological health and integrity of the land and water systems?
It's in fairly good shape, generally speaking, but there are some areas along the moraine, some watersheds or some sub-watersheds in particular, where there's been a fair bit of human-based impact, where some of those elements are poor to fair. Could be water quality, could be fisheries, could be a lack of forest cover. It's so important for the ecological health of this feature and any feature that we have a significant amount of native natural heritage cover. Federal guidelines suggest we need about 30% forest cover in a watershed for it to be reasonably healthy. And for stream and river valleys, that number goes up to about 75%.
Wow.
The assessments across the moraine in 2008 and more recently in 2014 by the 9 conservation authorities who at that time did a report card on the same parameters. They found in follow-up that there had been some further degradation of some of those watersheds even since 2008, particularly around the issues of loss of forest cover, loss of biodiversity, loss of some fish species, largely due to water quality impairment and temperature increases in some of the watercourses because of a loss of cover. Or it could be contamination, could be just erosion, or it could be contamination from human activity and chemicals. Natural infrastructure is really all of our natural vegetation. It's water, it's soil, it's even sand and stone, all those elements of the environment which together provide, I'd say, ecological services to not only we, the public, but also to all of the environment that we want to protect, whether it's wildlife, our water resources, and our vegetation. So where we have degraded watersheds, whether it's a stream itself or whether it's the watershed as a whole, we have to work together. We have to, as we did in the early part of really the growth of interest in the Oak Ridges Moraine, around the time that the plan came into being, we need to mobilize residents. We need to engage our communities again like we once did, so we can collectively work to not only understand what we need to do, but then do it. It's going to start with a lot of restoration work. That involves planting. It's a simple activity, but it has a huge impact, whether it's trees, shrubs, wildflowers, grasses. In southern Ontario, there's 6 million people that live within those 80 watersheds. That's a lot of communities. So what we do up here in the moraines has huge impacts. I think we all know the value of wetlands. They are a natural filtering system of the environment. We very much need to continue to invest in monitoring so we can understand the health of our various watersheds. All 80 of them is now a benchmark going forward. So we can continue to target areas where we really need to make important investments in trying to restore and enhance those watersheds.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rob. Really wonderful. Join us for new episodes to Discover the Moraine. There's lots to choose from.